On today's show, Ja Morant, Anthony Davis, the showdown in the play-in. Who has the advantage? Which bigs will have the bigger size? We'll talk about that and more in Locked On NBA. Mavs and Grizzlies crossover right now. And welcome. You are locked on to the Dallas Mavericks and the Memphis Grizzlies, your team every day. My name is Nick Angstadt, media member covering the Dallas Mavericks for 10 years over on Locked On Mavs. Thanks for being an everydayer, making Locked On Mavs your first listen. Joining me from the great Locked On Grizzlies show, the duo, the odd couple, Joe Mullinax, Locked On Grizzlies, DaMichael Cole, the commercial appeal.
What you got? Wait a second. What in the world makes us odd? I don't understand why in the world you would say something like that. I think that we are totally a natural pairing, DaMichael and I. We are the dynamic duo over on Locked On Grizzlies. That's what we are.
If you guys didn't have a show together, you'd just be hanging out in real life.
Yeah, we're totally the same person. Like DaMichael and I run in the same circles down in Memphis. He's out at 3 a.m. on a Saturday. I've been asleep for 7 hours. That's exactly the same kind of person. The exact same thing.
Much like DaMichael and Joe, these two teams are different, but similar in some ways. We'll get into some of the differences. The size, obviously, there's going to be a ton of bigs in this. This is a game for 7-footers if you're into that kind of stuff. And we'll also talk about Anthony Davis and his matchups with the Grizzlies the last couple of games and years. We'll talk about a whole bunch of things, but let's start on the Grizzlies side with Ja Morant, because that's the big story in all of this. DaMichael, you reported earlier today that he is questionable for the game. He's going to be a game time decision. There's no way Ja doesn't play in this game, right?
Oh yeah, he's more than likely to play. That is kind of the intention. That is what he said from the very beginning. You know, when we asked him after the loss against Golden State, he said, "I'm going to play." Like he said, that's kind of how he approaching it, or whatever the case may be. So I think, you know, they're going to give him the full extent of time. They didn't have a shoot around, you know, the morning of the game. And you know, they've been having those pretty consistently, but they didn't have a shoot around, so he'll have pretty much the whole day to kind of get ready, and they're very hopeful.
That fixes an ankle. A whole day fixes an ankle, right?
Hey, did you see the game against Golden State? He didn't even go to the locker room.
That's right.
All he did was went to the hallway and, you know, got some magic put into his system, drunk some water, and he was back in the game.
What was in that water?
That's the $1 million question.
Some of Mike's secret stuff. Joe, what's the difference between a full-strength Ja Morant and the Ja Morant we'll probably get to see in this game?
A lot more jumpers. I think that you're not going to see Ja testing the trees, so to speak. I know we'll talk more about the bigs later on, but he's definitely not going to go among Anthony Davis and Dereck Lively and those types as often. He's going to take a lot more jumpers. The good news on that front is he's been shooting threes at a much better clip the last couple of months. It's been something the Grizzlies fans have been hoping and praying for years. And it's a small sample size. We certainly need a larger one, but he's been hot from deep of late. The Mavericks still have to respect Morant as a driver of the basketball. Even if it's only to the mid-range, you collapse too far and Desmond Bane's out in the corner, that's a problem. So they're still going to have to respect him and give him that space to shoot. And Ja has been hitting them as of late. So if that can happen and continue, he'll still be a productive player for them. And there's nobody on the Mavericks offensively that's really going to pick on Ja and be able to do so in terms of dribble penetration. It's a lot of forwards and bigs. I know you know that, Nick. So it's not like there's anybody except for maybe in the post that's going to make Ja miserable.
Oops, all forwards is some kind of what the Mavericks are doing right now. They started Naji Marshall, Klay Thompson, PJ Washington, Anthony Davis, and Dereck Lively in that last game. And that's the lineup that the kid wants to go with, unless they, maybe he goes with a Brandon Williams or a Dante Exum. And he's gone with Dante Exum a couple times in the starting lineup. But yeah, you're right. There is nobody on the Mavericks that is going to pick on Ja, except for size-wise. I could see a PJ Washington post him up. I could see a PJ Washington try and take, or PJ and a Naji drive and try and take a floater off of him, because they can just, rise up over the top of him. Obviously, an Anthony Davis or a Gafford gets on him, then all of a sudden that's a big mismatch in that. But yeah, there is not a guy that's going to try and beat him off the dribble. Maybe Naji, or except for Brandon Williams, who has been this two-way guy that has really stepped up. We'll talk about him a little bit later. But the Ja Morant, Jaren Jackson, Desmond Bane trio has been oft talked about as can they keep them long-term? What can we do long-term? Just in terms of this game, what are you looking for from just the three of those guys? Who you think needs to step up the most in any of that for either of you?
I think in this game, Jaren Jackson Jr. is the guy that you want to step up the most of those three players. I think that Desmond Bane is going to have a solid game as well, because you talk about the fact that they're probably going to shoot more jumpers. Like this Dallas front court, there's a small sample size. I'm sure you'll get to that a little bit to work with there, but you kind of get the sense that with that makeup, they're going to be tough to score against in the paint, and that's how it was for the Sacramento Kings. It was tough to get anything on the inside. We've seen Anthony Davis, we've seen Dereck Lively and Daniel Gafford from the Grizzlies' perspective, and now you fusion them onto one team. It's going to be somewhat tough to score in the inside. It's going to be, Josh going to have to probably get to that floater a little bit more. It's going to be Desmond Bane get to the mid-range jumper. But the one guy from a size standpoint who can go to the paint and naturally, I say, go get some of his shots is Jaren Jackson Jr. But he's going to have to make them. I think what Golden State did was a good job of, basically, I say preying on the fact that he isn't known to be a strong playmaker, especially passing the ball out of the post and things like that. And there were several times in that game where he would put his head down and dribble, and a weak side defender would come, and they strip the ball away or something like that. I don't expect that Dallas, because of their front court and their size, would bring much help. So you talk about more one-on-one opportunities for him, but it's not like he's going against any puppies out there. So it's going to be a tough matchup. I think Jaren is the one guy who can kind of he has to be that guy, because he's going to get some one-on-one opportunities, and that hasn't been a consistent theme for him this season.
Yeah, what did Chris Vernon say? That the Mavs have all men. They're all men. And,
and no puppies over there.
That's right. The Grizzlies have their own men, too, over on their side. Play with size a lot. Zach Edey, Jaren Jackson Jr. play like 14 minutes a game together. Joe, what have we seen from that group, and what are you looking at from that group to play against Anthony Davis and a Dereck Lively and a Daniel Gafford?
It's a mixed bag, because DaMichael has pointed out on our show in the past that the best two-man rating of anybody that's a consistent starter for the Grizzlies is Jaren Jackson Jr. and Zach Edey. They have the best two-man net rating of any pairing that includes Grizzly starters, and it's even better than that. It's the best of anybody that's played at least 600 minutes together, according to NBA.com stats. So these are two guys that have statistically done a lot of good things, but I wrote about it for our newsletter a couple of days ago.
Hey, LockedOnDaily.com.
That's exactly right. Wrote for, not AI generated, a piece about the realities of Jaren and Zach not playing well against Golden State, whether it's Edey not finishing well around the rim, not being able to dunk above his head. He always brings it down below where everybody else is. He had a 6 or 7 inch height advantage against everybody on Golden State. And yet he was making the ball available to anybody that wanted it. He wasn't using his size effectively. And he also wasn't able to pass out of the post when they doubled him because of that size advantage. So while Edey was a +6, that number is misleading. He struggled in that game. And Jaren struggled against the Warriors. He was only 2 for 6 on 2-point shot attempts. He was 4 for 9 from 3, but he's 6'11", 245 pounds. And again, he had the size advantage. This is a game where that size advantage will not be as pronounced. How are both of those guys going to be able to respond? I think outside of Ja's availability, that's the biggest storyline. Can those two match up with and perhaps even outplay when AD's not on the court? Because I think we all can agree AD is the best of all of them. When Davis is not on the floor, are Edey, Jaren, whatever the bigs are that Memphis has out there, like Asante Aldama, can they win those front court minutes? That's going to be something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because it's the strength of these two teams, right? The size they can play with and the different lineups. Even talk about, Santi Aldama, like you said, bring in different kinds of looks with size. Mavs, similar thing. You can play AD at the 5, you can play him at the 4, and which one will win out, and or which others maybe they just equal each other out, and then which others can find advantages, and I think that's something that's really interesting. DaMichael, what issues has Anthony Davis given the Grizzlies that you're looking for in this game?
Yeah, he's been a problem. He's everything that the Grizzlies struggle against. He's a great rim protector on the defensive end. We've seen a lot of times Ja Morant drive to the basket, and sometimes he changes his shot mid-air when there's that 7'6" wingspan just pops up out of nowhere. He's had a lot of blocks against Jaren Jackson Jr. just going straight up. Desmond Bane, like he's an absolute disruptor. against them and pretty much anyone, but it's shown up against the Grizzlies, specifically in that playoff series. You want to go back to 2023. The one thing, or if you say he hasn't been great against the Grizzlies and specifically the players, surprisingly in a way, Zach Edey. Zach Edey has had success in the NBA against Anthony Davis up to this point. They played against each other twice when Anthony Davis was playing for the Los Angeles Lakers. And if you go back to both of those games, ironically, both were losses for the Grizzlies. But Zach Edey in the first game did not start in the first game. I think the Grizzlies were almost scared of the idea of him starting that game because, I mean, down the stretch, LeBron James and Anthony Davis had some success as a pick and roll tandem, and we could probably, see the Mavs kind of go into some of that stuff. But over the course of the game, Zach Edey was a difference maker because of the fact that when he was in the game, he could rebound, he could be physical against Anthony Davis, all the things that if you take Zach Edey out of the equation and you go back to 2023, 2024, the Grizzlies struggled against Anthony Davis in those areas. So I think how they use Zach Edey is going to be really telling because we go into this last game against Golden State, and the big thing was like during the game, like we're watching Zach Edey guard Jimmy Butler. This is really happening right now. Zach Edey's guarding Jimmy Butler, and I asked the coach about it after the game, Tomas Islo, and he basically says that he said a lot, but in short words, he basically said that Jaren Jackson Jr. they didn't want him guarding Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler's prone to draw a lot of fouls, and they wanted Zach Edey basically on one of the weaker shooters, so to speak. That was kind of the idea with the thinking in a way. If you look at the Mavs front court and the success that Zach Edey has had, maybe I want to see if they start Zach Edey on Anthony Davis or they just make it simple and start him on Dereck Lively, because we could expect him to be on Dereck Lively. But thinking back to that that Warriors game, if we're talking the same strategy, because Anthony Davis is going to draw some fouls. That's another thing that I didn't really mention as much. He's gotten Jaren Jackson Jr. in foul trouble a bunch of times. So real interested to see if they cross-match that.
It'll be fascinating to see this matchup coming up. Let's talk about the Mavericks. What are the Mavericks? How do the Mavericks find success against the Kings? How will they attack the Grizzlies? We'll talk about all that and more coming up. Today's Locked On Mavs, Locked On Grizzlies. Today's episode of Locked On Mavs, Locked On Grizzlies, the crossover is brought to you by Upwork. Scaling your business requires the right expertise at the right time. With Upwork, you can find specialized freelancers in marketing, development, design, and more experts ready to help take your business to the next level. Sometimes you're like an NBA team where you've got these one-offs. You've got a play-in game or something like that. You need to find talent that can help you just for that season or just for that period of time. Upwork helps you. They give you flexibility, connecting you with top freelance talent across multiple industries, including IT, AI, web development, and marketing. Whether you need an extra hand for a project or a long-term partner, they can find you that as well. Upwork makes hiring simple and affordable. They also, instead of hiring full-time, Upwork helps find affordable top-lance freelancers to scale your business effectively so that you're not wasting time or money. Posting a job is free and simple, and within a day, you can get multiple qualified candidates to choose from. Visit Upwork.com to post your job right now. Upwork, UPWORK.com, Upwork.com to connect with the top talent and grow your business today. Thanks for hanging out with us on Locked On Mavs, Locked On Grizzlies, the crossover. It's the play-in, baby. This is what it's all about. This is what we've worked this whole season. Both of these teams expected to be right here, boys, right?
This isn't depressing at all to be in
from number
game
2 to the play-in.
From the NBA finals to the play-in.
That's right.
From the number 2 seed to the play-in. We are the two biggest disappointments in the Western Conference. Let's get it on.
I think the Mavs just outed the biggest disappointment. Maybe not maybe not expectation wise, but definitely I'm disappointed in you, as a franchise for what you did.
But the exception for, and I don't want to hate on Locked On Kings.
Matt will take no exception to you hating on the Kings on his behalf.
The exception is success. That's the exception, right? The Kings' history is not filled with glorious moments. So the fact that they were lighting the beam so gloriously, that was the exception. So I would argue that Dallas being an NBA Finals team to here, and then the Grizzlies literally being the 2 seed 7 weeks ago to here, I would argue those are the two biggest disappointments in the Western Conference this season.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. What are you guys looking at on the Mavericks perspective? What are you interested to know or to see from this team?
You go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, thanks. I'm curious about this Brandon Williams guy because the last time the Grizzlies played the Mavericks, or at least the last time that I remember, I was at a coaches convention. I was watching at a bar with some coaching buddies, and I kept watching the game. You know, people trying to talk about football. I'm like, leave me alone. The game's on. And I keep trying to. And Brandon Williams, who is this freaking Brandon Williams guy? Because Dallas was leaning on him in this game that I believe a lot of guys sat and rested. And I was like, why in the world is this game close? And Brandon Williams was a major reason why. And while Anthony Davis is now active and Dallas is a little in better straits than they were in that game, Memphis is still a 6 or 7 point favorite tonight. But what makes me nervous, I know that Anthony Davis is good. I know that he's going to be there. What in the world can we expect from Brandon Williams? That's the guy that has me shook at the moment.
The best $47,000,
The Brandon Williams is the best $47,000 spent in the NBA this season. He was a two-way player for the Mavericks this year. He kind of came on the scene back in like 2022 in one of those Portland Trailblazers tanking seasons where they just were like, let's just play all the two-way players we can find. And so he played a couple games, for them. Then he didn't play in the NBA, and then he was on the Mavericks last year and didn't play a lot, obviously, because they were a successful team, which is why they're a disappointment this season. But he didn't really look like an NBA guard to me last year. He's one of those guards that can do a lot of things. He can, he's has a great handle. He can dribble. He can shoot. He can drive. He can just do a bunch of things like that. But a guard like that's that small, he's 6'1", 6'2". You have to be good at all those things in order to make it in the NBA. And each of those has to level up to a certain point. And I just didn't expect a lot from him this season on a two-way. And I didn't really expect him to play a lot because they had a lot of guard play at the time when I was thinking about Brandon Williams at the beginning of the season. Now, he's been like the Mavs savior in some kind of ways because he has leapfrogged Spencer Dinwiddie in the rotation. He has leapfrogged Dante Exum in some ways in the rotation. And he can get north-south. He's super quick. He honestly reminds me of Kyrie, the way that he plays. He's not Kyrie to that level of player, but the way that he's shifty, the way that he finishes around the rim, he's taken a lot of stuff from Kyrie. Kyrie really took him under his wing. And I'm looking to see if Jason Kidd makes a decision to put him maybe in the starting lineup if they don't want to go with that big, huge lineup with the all 6'7" and above guys that I talked about because they're worried about Ja, they're worried about Desmond Bane, or they're worried about not getting enough dribble drive penetration or whatever they decide to do. But he is definitely somebody off the bench that they can rely on now, and that's kind of surprising. But he ran out of two-way games, and so then they had to wait because the Mavs were over the cap, so they had to wait until the last two games of the season to sign him. They paid him the $47,000 that DaMichael mentioned, and then now he gets to play in the postseason because he's actually on the roster.
The greatest $47,000 spent, man. But as Joe said, we saw him a couple games ago, a couple Grizzlies games ago. That was the game I think that Joe was referring to, and he kind of popped up on the scene, and he was keeping that game close for the most part. But I think if you talk about attacking the Grizzlies and where their weaknesses are more so on the defensive end, it's they don't have a lot of perimeter defenders, which is probably why they're a favorite in this game. Because you look at the Mavs on the paper, they don't look like the team that's most equipped to expose the Grizzlies in those areas. There's no Jalen Wells. They traded Marcus Smart. Vince Williams Jr. was a guy they had high hopes for. And we just saw him play just a couple minutes against Golden State. And
they were bad minutes. DaMichael and I are Vince Williams Jr. apologists. We thought he was going to be the starter going into the season. That was our guy. And he looked terrible. Now, a serious ankle injury derailed that. Yeah. Context matters. But I wouldn't be surprised, if they don't play Vince Williams Jr. at all in this contest.
I think that leads me to the question of what do you make of this Dallas backcourt pairing? I guess you could call it, even though it's Naji and Klay Thompson, and because here's the thing for me, Scottie Pippen Jr. when he comes in, he's pressuring the ball nonstop. He's drawing the offensive fouls. I'm sure on the Grizzlies side, pressuring these guys and because what we saw against the Kings was kind of a collective playmaking mentality through what's the makeup there? How are they kind of initiating offense without that natural point guard?
That's something I'm really interested in this game because I think you can get away with it playing against the Sacramento Kings and the defense that they play, especially their half-court defense. But I don't think you can get away with that, even without the perimeter defenders you guys talked about. But they have played this collective. Naji Marshall is really good at driving north-south, getting to his floater. He's one of the best finishers in the NBA on that floater, and so that's something that's super dangerous for him. But you can kind of leave him on the three-point line, and you don't have to defend him very much. And so that kind of messes up with the spacing. You got Klay Thompson, who's obviously a knockdown shooter. Don't let him hit one. But he is not a guy that's going to create a lot of shots off the dribble or dribble penetration and all that. You got PJ Washington, who's kind of added some of that to his game. But then you say, all right, well, maybe some of these guys. Then you have Anthony Davis and Dereck Lively or Gafford hanging out in the paint. And so you don't really create a lot of drives to the rim. The Mavs only took 10 shots at the rim against the Kings, the Kings are not a great paint defense team either. But they don't create that many because there's just not a lot of spacing on this team. They really struggle with spacing. They really struggle with shot creation and creating threes. And that's one of the things I doubted the Mavs against the Kings, because I didn't think they were going to be create enough threes or open threes in order to beat that team. And they did, and then all the Kings underperformed. And so then it ended up being a Mavs win in that sense. Coming up, let's get into some more questions. What else do we want to see from these teams? What else are we looking for? Who ends up getting the win? I'm curious about the absences of Jalen Wells and Brandon Clark. Who needs to step up in their place? We'll talk about that and more coming up. Locked On Mavs, Locked On Grizzlies, cross. Today's episode of Locked On Mavs, Locked On Grizzlies crossover, brought to you by Monarch Money. I've been using Monarch Money. I love it because it enables you to not just budget your money, but it's a complete financial command center. You can do all kinds of different things with it. You can combine your banking accounts, investments, spending all in one place. So you can see it all. It's all lined up for you. They'll even have this thing where it takes your transactions. You have to review it to put it in a certain category so you know everything goes in a place. And one of the things I love a good visual graph, and it'll show you all the money you spent in a single period, a year, 2 years, a month, a quarter, whatever. And it'll put it in a flow chart. And this is all right, this is where your money came in and this is where it went out. And it shows it visually. I love that kind of stuff about these kind of budgeting apps. But again, it's not just that, it's complete financial command center. So you can stop managing your money and start building wealth. All in one place. You got to love the convenience of that. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA to get 50% off your first year. That's Monarch Money. Monarch like the butterfly. MonarchMoney.com. Code LOCKEDONNBA for half off your first year. All right. Locked On Mavs, Locked On Grizzlies. Crossover. The play-in game. Playing for all the marbles. Winner take home. Win or go home. Either way. I'm curious about the absences of Jalen Wells and Brandon Clark. Who has to step up with those guys being out? Because Jalen Wells started 74 games. Brandon Clark is one of the bigs off the bench that allows the Grizzlies to play these quicker lineups that are still big. Who needs to step up in their absences?
On the Grizzlies side, I think it's simple in the fact that Zach Edey is it's all going to keep going back to him, because we watched that Golden State game and he's in there in the closing minutes and he's playing the last minutes. Joe can attest, we didn't watch many games this season where Zach Edey was in with 2 minutes to go, and that just wasn't a thing over the course of the season.
Thanks a lot, Taylor Jenkins.
And there it is. I wonder how long we'd make it before Taylor Jenkins got mentioned in this show. But yeah, some people say that Taylor Jenkins, didn't maximize the talent of Zach Edey, or whatever the case may be. But he's going to be a big part of it. I think on the perimeter, especially in this game, like you said, look, the Grizzlies' biggest problem on the perimeter, as of late at least, is keeping the ball in front of them, dribble penetration, guys like that. But on the Mavs side, I don't know. I mean, Brandon Williams has had some success against them, so we'll see, how much they lean on him in that regard. But it's going to be, Anthony Davis and what he's doing. It's going to be the rebounding, battle. But Zach Edey has been really, really big for the Grizzlies on the boards. Like, if you go back to that Golden State game, Golden State got some wins against Zach Edey, right? Putting him in some of the actions and things like that, making him play in space. But Zach Edey got some wins against Golden State because he was cleaning the glass. And Golden State had to counter at times because they had to bring Kevon Looney in the game. And there was some foul trouble things with Draymond and all that as well. But still, they had to use size because he was having his way, around the rim. And he ended up being a positive over the course of the game, even though if you watched it, there were times where it was clear they were attacking him. So I think it's more him than anyone. We keep going back to it. This game is just all about the size and who's going to be the more physical team, who's going to be the team that kind of wins in that regard.
You mentioned it. Oh, go ahead, Joe.
I was going to say, in terms of size, the more unique of the Grizzlies bigs in terms of size is Santi Aldama. And I think Santi matters a lot in this game because he plays the PJ Washington role for these Grizzlies, at least to my eye, but he's bigger, right? Like he's a bigger PJ Washington, maybe not as good as PJ. I'd have to go a little bit deeper into the numbers. Santi's playing one of the best seasons of his career, if not the best season of his career. Very well timed and restricted free agency coming up. But I do think, yeah, it's very convenient. But I do think that Santi has the opportunity to show his worth in a game like this, where it is size against size. And you are, if PJ Washington is you, and you are PJ Washington, and it's the Spider-Man meme, but you're a slightly taller Spider-Man, and not even that slight, 3 or 4 inches taller. How do you maximize that? How do you utilize that advantage? Because I agree, Lively and Edey, depending on how Isolo lines up those matchups, they kind of cancel each other out in some ways, in terms of I don't think Dallas can abuse the Grizzlies the way that Golden State did in those actions. So can players like Santi, or if Memphis decides to go small with Scottie Pippen Jr., like they did against Golden State, if they go that route, and they just try to run circles around the bigger Mavericks. There's lots of this is going to be a really good window into the philosophy and in-game strategy of Tomas Isolo. And that's the main reason I want this season to continue at this point, is if Isolo is the leader in the clubhouse to be the next head coach of the Grizzlies, let's get a bigger sample size of what the heck this guy actually is as a coach. This is a fascinating chance to go from a Warriors team that was small to a Mavericks team that's big. How does he take this roster and tweak game plan from day to day?
Yeah, let me add to that real quick, because that is the one adjustment that the Grizzlies can make, and I would be really intrigued to see how over the course of the game the Mavs counter. They're the one team they can throw. They've done it at times this season. They could put Santi Aldama in the starting lineup at the 3.
I think they will. That's my bold prediction.
I think they will too, because they started Scottie Pippen Jr. They had barely used that lineup over the course of the season against Golden State, and he was mainly in there to chase Steph Curry around the floor, for 35 minutes or whatever the case may be. In this case, PJ Washington is a bigger player, and I mean, I don't know if over the course of the season he's just that good as an offensive rebounder, but he had some really good offensive rebounds against the King, like some big man boards where Anthony Davis, who's taking a lot of jump shots, and he was basically just replacing Anthony Davis and crashing the glass. And that's what Santi Aldama, in a way, when he's been at the 3, he's been a very good rebounder for the Grizzlies in that role. So I think they can kind of, even out the size advantage that Dallas typically has in a way, because they can throw Santi, at the 3 and survive in that way. Because the problem would be if Dallas had, some wings that could kind of, put him in space and things like that. But yeah, that's one big adjustment that I think Memphis probably will make, and it'll be interesting to see, how they counter Nick, how Dallas counters.
Yeah, I don't know. We've barely seen this Mavericks team all together. Like that game, that play-in game was the 3rd game this season we've seen Anthony Davis, Dereck Lively, and PJ Washington together, right? So
wow,
there are no trends. There's no what do they counter with when they see this? Like we just don't know at this point. I even asked Doug Christie before the game against the Kings, the interim coach of the Kings. I asked him, how do you even prepare for a team that has played that lineup 3 times or 2 times at that time? And he says you go with what the stars. He said Anthony Davis. We look at what they do when he plays at the 4, what he plays at the 5, and then go from there. And then you just look at historically what the coach has done and what the coach has wanted to do. The Grizzlies just made a big change at coach. We mentioned Taylor Jenkins, and now you have the interim coach. Say the name of the interim coach for everybody at home.
Joe, you want to go for it?
See, I knew you were going to do that to me.
I mean, I can do it.
Tomas Isolo.
There we go.
Tomas Isolo. Do we know what he wants to do that's different so far than what Taylor Jenkins was doing? You mentioned some of the Zach Edey, obviously him closing, but is there anything else different that we expect?
Edey and Morant are the biggest things, right, DaMichael?
Yeah, for sure. It's kind of strange because you got a conundrum with the Grizzlies, and it goes back to Jaren Jackson Jr. as well. Before the coaching change, people around here, they call it, I haven't called it this. It's a weird term to me. Joe said it a couple times too. Equal opportunity offense. That's so weird to me. But they called it the equal opportunity offense because so many guys would have the ball in their hands. Ja Morant would just be standing in the corner while Desmond Bane would be orchestrating the offense or whatever the case may be. And it was weird to people. But what you had with that offense, Nick, was you had a lot of different guys touching the ball. So you had a lot of different guys having, nice scoring stretches. But Jaren, out of all the players, seemed to really flourish when the Grizzlies played that offensive style. But when Tomas Isolo basically took over, he said, we're going to feature the key guys more. We're going to emphasize pick and roll more, which is Ja Morant's bread and butter. Ja Morant, if you look at the numbers, despite the call 12 and how he's closed out a bunch of games, he is not a great isolation player by the numbers, just one-on-one, mano-a-mano, me versus you. Over the course of a game, the numbers have not just been great for him in that regard. When the game's on the line, somehow, some way, he seems to be one of the most clutch players in the NBA in that situation. But if you just look at the numbers over the course of the game, he hasn't been great. So with that factored in, Isolo has kind of come in and he's been more pick and roll. Pick and roll is not Jaren Jackson Jr.'s strength. He's usually a pick and pop big. He rarely rolls. I think there was one example against Golden State where him and Ja did a pick and roll. Ja threw it up and he caught it and finished it at the rim. I'm like, that looks so weird because we don't see it much. Like he rarely rolls to the rim. So you're not going to get a lot of that from Jaren. But the big problem in a way for them, if you want to call it that, is with Isolo, they've kind of featured Zach Edey more setting those screens, which has allowed for him to be more physical, which has allowed for him to not be standing at the three-point line, shooting threes and things like that. And his numbers have reflected that in the coaching change. And so have Ja Morant's numbers as well, getting downhill, playing in pick and roll, creating those advantages that he really didn't have as much in the old system. So that's kind of the biggest difference. You can expect the Grizzlies to put guys in pick and roll and really force them to be decision makers on the defensive end.
Our friends at FanDuel have it as a 6-point game right now. The Grizzlies are the favorites. Just your general feeling about how this game is going to go. Mine, I'm struggling with this Grizzlies team because I think that if Ja Morant is healthy in a way, I think that his dribble penetration is something that I think that could hurt the Mavericks. Although I'm curious what he does when he meets that back line of Lively and Davis. But I don't know that, again, I didn't know how the Mavericks were going to score enough to beat a Kings team, but the Kings ended up not scoring enough. But I think against this Grizzlies defense, it's going to be interesting to see where the Mavs get the shots. Does Klay Thompson go off again? Does a Brandon Williams go off? Does Anthony Davis have a more efficient night? Somebody else has got to step up in that way. And we just have not seen this Mavs team enough offensively to get a win. So I get why it is a 6-point game. Although, if we're just going like size for size, I'm going to pick the Mavs front line over the Grizzlies front lines. Then it's just up to the rest of them to see if Desmond and if Bane and Ja Morant can create enough advantage, which they probably can, being who they are.
One thing you can bank on, and Joe knows this, when it comes to the Grizzlies, they will find your weakest three-point shooter, and they will guard him almost in an embarrassing way.
Naji Marshall will not be touched in any way.
I was going to say,
likely means that Edey is probably going to be on Naji Marshall if we're going by recent trends, and they will just leave him.
Well, this
alone.
This is a too big team. So
no, that's true. You're right. Yeah, that's fair. So they'll probably just completely abandon him and just let him be out there.
Exactly. They're going to make him. They're going to say, prove it. Yeah. I mean, you saw how they were guarding Jimmy Butler? He's Jimmy Butler,
a better shooter than Naji Marshall.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that's kind of the one thing that stands out to me. And you talk about the front court advantage that Dallas has in some ways, but I feel like the front court defense is the strength of the Grizzlies defense right now. And when you factor in that Jaren Jackson Jr. and Zach Edey, when they're playing, they're solid. Like you talked about the 2-man net rating numbers there. Yeah. We're talking about 12.7 points better than the opponents. So when those two are on the floor together, they're very solid on the back end. Now, Anthony Davis, he can draw some fouls. He's going to do a little scream here and there and try to get the referee to blow the whistle. And if that happens, that I think that would play into Dallas's advantage. But just player for player, I think the Grizzlies front court is good enough. And then, of course, they have the advantage in the backcourt. The Grizzlies are going to push the tempo. They love to play with pace. That's another big thing. They're going to get out in transition. I think the Grizzlies win this game. I think Dallas is a very challenging opponent for the Grizzlies, but a lot of the weaknesses that the Grizzlies have, I just don't know if this Mavs team is best equipped to expose them, because specifically, and we've seen this in recent, I tried not to bring that name up the whole episode, but I got to right here. We've seen this with the Luka Doncic led Mavs. I tried.
You had to do it.
We almost made it through the whole show.
We almost made it through the whole show. But there were so there it is. There were so many times where the Grizzlies and Mavs would be going very close games down the stretch, and they just had the better closers. The Mavs had the better closer, and that's happened. I mean, the Grizzlies-Warriors game, they had the better closer. They had Steph Curry, made a couple threes down the stretch. They had the better closer. That's kind of been the separator at times for the Grizzlies, but I don't see that on the Mavs right now.
Lively and Davis together have played 54 minutes. Would you guys like to guess their net rating? It's very small sample size, yes, but
plus 52.
I'd say plus 21.
Plus 12. It's the
same. I was
same
as the Grizzlies.
Same as Edey and Jaren Jackson.
Oh,
so it's like, all right, whoever's front court wins, I think wins this game. And I think that's something that we're going to see maybe early in this game. Go check out Locked On Grizzlies. Great stuff all the time. Great stuff on their newsletter. Like they said, lockedondaily.com on that. Guys, thanks so much for hanging out with us on Locked On Mavs. Locked On Grizzlies, the crossover. Boom.